Hello TL Travelers, and welcome back to the TL Travel YouTube channel. If you are new here, welcome to the family. If you have been on this channel for any amount of time, you know that we have been exploring in Canada for the last few years. And today I just wanted to share 10 tips for visiting Canada so that you can come prepared. So if you are interested in this video as well as other Canadian content, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Check out the resources in the description down below, and let's just jump into my top 10 tips. My number one tip, and this goes for visiting really any country, I'm just gonna get it out of the way off the top, is to be sure to check whether or not you need a visa in order to enter. Different countries are going to have different visa requirements, so I will leave a link or resource in the description for you to check whether or not you require one. But visa, so important before you start the planning process, before you even start thinking of anything else. Definitely check to see if you need a visa. Now, with that out of the way, we have tip number 2, which is Canada is big. And I think a lot of people, or at least in my experience, a lot of people when I meet them don't quite know exactly how big until they go to try to plan a trip here. And a lot of people are familiar with places like Toronto, for example. Vancouver is another popular one, but what they don't realize is that in a short trip, they're not going to be able to drive from Toronto to Vancouver and see both. Just for example. So, Canada, large. What you want to do is make a list of all of your top places that you're looking to see, and then decide on the length of your trip and sort of make your cuts, I guess, based on that. To give you an idea though, I will say that I grew up in the Toronto area and I now live out in Alberta, closer to the Rocky Mountains. And the last time that I did the drive from Toronto to Edmonton, it took me about 4 days, obviously with stops here and there. If you're traveling, you're gonna be making stops as well. So that'll give you just a little idea of how large the country is, and that's just from Ontario to Alberta, not to mention coast to coast, north to south, all of that good stuff. So plan accordingly. Number 3, and this is another super important one, is to check the weather. The weather in Canada does vary. Contrary to popular belief, it's not cold here all the time. And depending on the province that you're in, it can get really, really hot in the summertime, and it can also get super, super cold in the winter. And not only is it going to vary by season, but it's going to vary by location. Going back to how big the country is, obviously the weather on the west coast and the east coast is going to be very different at the same time of year. So once you sort of have an idea of the different places that you want to travel to in Canada, you're also going to want to make sure that you check the weather in each of those locations individually and pack accordingly. Another interesting fact and tip about Canada that not everybody knows is that we actually have 2 official languages, French and English. And although French is not spoken super widely across the country, if you are traveling to areas like Quebec and sort of that surrounding area, some other places in the east that are very heavily French, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have some knowledge of French or understanding of French, or at the very least, expect to hear it there and try and speak it there, because yeah, not everywhere in Canada is going to be English first. So take that into consideration. Next up is going to be regarding domestic flights, because something that I have noticed, especially for travelers coming in from European countries and United States, is that they expect our domestic flights to be really, really inexpensive. And I will tell you right now, unfortunately, they are not. We do have some budget airlines, Swoop being one of them, Lynx, Flair. So I will leave some information about those airlines down below. But don't expect to be getting super, super cheap flights. And on a lot of our cheaper flights, you do have to also pay for each individual bag. So if you want to carry on, or you want to check bag, you want to pick your seat, all of those things will cost extra. So if you do plan to be flying from place to place using a budget airline, you also want to consider how much baggage you're going to have with you, because in some cases, if you do have a lot of checked baggage, carry-on, etc., and you are going to be flying budget, it ends up making more financial sense to just buy a regular price ticket. So you'll need to do a little bit of math there, but yeah, don't expect those domestic flights to be a cheap way to get around. Speaking of transportation, next we are going to talk about transit, because especially if you were coming from somewhere, possibly European country, don't expect there to be the same type of extensive transit system here in Canada. One of my favorite things about traveling around Europe is how easy it is to go from place to place, city to city, country to country by train or using local transit, and that you don't necessarily have to plan it in advance because there are so many options. In Canada, that is not the case at all. We do have a train that's more of like a tourist luxury experience that you can enjoy. But as far as just like being able to walk up, pick up a ticket, hop on a train and get to your next spot, that's not really gonna be an option. So from the start of your planning, you're gonna wanna be thinking about how you are getting from place to place and planning that in advance. Don't wing it. Next, for number 7, we have cell phone plans. That is another thing that we do not do cheaply. So another thing that I tend to do when I travel, and I know a lot of travelers do, is when I land in a country, I will pick up a SIM card, activate a plan, and off I go, and I've got my texting, and I've got all the things that I need. Canada, cell phones in Canada are not cheap. Plans, not cheap, all those things. So if you have the option with your home provider from whatever country you're coming from to pay a little bit extra in order to use your cell phone number locally in Canada as you go, that might be an option, but don't plan on picking up a really cheap like $20 phone and phone plan sort of situation to get yourself around here in Canada, because the cell phone plans are not cheap. Unfortunately. It's frustrating. Legal drinking age is another thing that I want to talk about really quickly here for tip number 8, especially if you are doing like a university trip type thing, a little gap year. Some provinces, the legal drinking age is 18 and some it is 19. So if you are one of those two ages, specifically 18, you are definitely going to want to check to see what the drinking age is in the province that you're traveling to, and if you're traveling from one province to another, again, just to know how that's going to differ from province to province, whether or not you can actually go out and enjoy yourself with some beverages. Another thing that varies from province to province is sales tax. So you will notice that in Alberta, for example, if you're coming to Alberta and you receive your bill, your tax will be 5% versus in Ontario, for example, I believe it's 13% HST, amalgamated sales tax. Either way, it varies widely from province to province, and the tax on our products and services is not included in the actual price that's listed. So if you're at a restaurant, for example, the menu price that you see is going to have that added tax onto it. Same with any products that you pick up if you're out shopping for clothes, things like that. There's always going to be that added sales tax after the fact, which again, another thing that is annoying. I don't know why they don't just lump it all in together, but that's the way that it is. And then my 10th tip is regarding tipping. This is one thing that I always look up about in any country that I'm traveling to for the first time, whether or not tipping is required, for what types of services, how much, all of those types of things. And in Canada, tipping, though not required, is recommended. It is sort of expected. You will notice that when you go to checkout, if you're paying by card, there'll be an option for usually like tip 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. You do not have to choose one of those options. You can choose not to tip, and you can choose to put in a dollar amount if there's a different amount that you feel higher or lower you'd like to give. The only time that I can really think of in Canada where a tip is required is some restaurants will have a rule, and they'll usually list it on the menu, where if the party is larger than 8 or 10 people, that type of thing, that they're automatically going to include a tip in your bill. But they will let you know that up front, like it will be written somewhere, so just keep an eye out for that. All that said though, those are my top 10 tips for visiting Canada. If you have any questions about your upcoming visit or you want some recommendations on where to go, definitely check out the resources in the description down below and feel free to leave a question in the comments. I always try to get in and answer any questions that are there. And if you've not already hit the like and subscribe button, definitely do it. I post new travel content every single Sunday and we've got lots of adventures coming up here pretty soon, hopefully. So until I see you in the next one, stay great, travel safe, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye guys.